Hey, how's it going? I felt like filming a video. It's been a while since I've done one of these. My computer decided to have a hissy fit. It was terrible. I thought I lost my NaNoWriMo book. It was the first time ever that I have not saved my book in two places at once. First time. And then my computer just, it was terrible. But everything's okay. Everything is fine. I currently have a temporary fix for my computer, and my book is okay. But videos might be a little sporadic as we work on trying to get it in working condition with no temporary things. Anyway, I thought I would film my favorite books of 2020. Let's do a nice, fun, positive video. We all need some of that, right? So anyway, I have some books here. I don't know how many. 11 books. They're in no particular order. They're just the way I pulled them off my shelf. That I think are my favorites. The first one here is actually a reread, but I'm talking about it because, first of all, the first time I read it, it wasn't a favorite of the year. I rated it 4 stars. This time, I'm talking about it because it is a favorite this year, but I reread it, but I listened to it on audio as my reread, so it was a completely different medium, and it was a whole new experience, and let me tell you, it was amazing. And that was Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, which, if you don't know, is told in like multimedia formats. It's like basically like you're reading a big case file. So there are audio transcripts and interviews and emails and text messages, and there's even like scans of journal entries and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And it takes place in the future, in space, after a planet has been destroyed, and it follows the people on that planet on the 2 ships who have rescued them, but the people who destroyed the planet are after those 2 refugee ships, and there's a whole bunch of absurd, scary, exciting things going on. There's an AI in it who I love. The audiobook was so well done. It was like I was listening to a movie. There are sound effects. It's a full cast. Like, every character has its own actor. And it was so good, and it was so fun, and even the sound effects and the music did not make it feel cheesy or corny. It was so well done, and I loved it so much, and I fell in love with the characters even more because hearing them speak just made them feel that much more real, and I adored it so much. It was so good. I'm gonna reread the whole trilogy this year, probably on audio, and I'm really excited. A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. I do feel like saying, for some reason, I didn't like this as much as the first one, but I still loved it so much. I can't tell you what this is about. It's gonna spoil the previous book, but the previous book is about this robot alien man thing who shows up all over the world. There's 60 of them, and someone gets famous basically overnight. It's about these alien things and also the girl becoming famous. It's super good. This was really good. It was really mind-blowing. It was very different from the first one. It had a very different atmosphere, but it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was good. It was great. The next one here is All Are Wrong Todays by Elon Mastai, which is a very interesting time travel book. I read this at the beginning of the year. I think this was my first 5-star book of the year, actually. I can't really remember, but it is about someone who goes back in time and messes something up, and when he goes back to the present day, he's in a different timeline, and his timeline is our timeline. And he's like, oh no, I've ruined everything. How do I fix this? Except the only thing about his predicament is that the world itself is much worse than the world that he comes from, except there are people in his timeline who have passed away who are alive in this timeline. So he's like, it's really good. It's got really short chapters, and it's a lot of narrative, but it was really good. This one sucked me in. The next one here is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I loved this. I had never read it before, and it brought me so much joy. It just made me so joyous. Like, It was so silly and funny and fun and ridiculous. It was great. Alice went on some ridiculous adventures, and I enjoyed every little bit of it. All right, the next book that I have here is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, which I adored so very much. It was such a lovely, sweet little story. My heart. You guys, my heart. It was so good. Oh my goodness. So this takes place in a world where there are people with magical abilities, and also, like, there are different types of magical creatures. And it follows a man who is a caseworker for magical children. And he gets given a job to go to an orphanage on this island and oversee them for a month to report back to his company and say if the children, the magical children in this orphanage, are better off here or if they need to go to another orphanage. And it's so sweet. It is so, so sweet. And it's not super plot based. It's definitely more of a character-based story, but it's so lovely. And the things that they do, the conversations they have, the things the children say are hilarious, adorable. Ugh, this book has my heart. The next one is my second last read of 2020, which was In a Holidays. This was just the perfect love story for me. It warmed my heart so much, and I was just basically like living vicariously through this main character and her love. So this kind of starts off as a Groundhog Day type story, except at Christmas time. Except the Groundhog Day stuff kind of gets out of the way pretty quickly. She repeats her Christmas vacation a few times at the beginning of the story, and then most of it is the timeline not repeating and just going through a regular Christmas romance, which, like, I guess wasn't, like, really needed, but it made the beginning fun. It's fine. I feel like this book accomplished exactly what it set out to do. I loved every second I spent reading it. It made me so happy. Every time I sat down to read it, I would read at least 50 pages in one go. So it got 5 stars, and I think I'm going to reread this again another Christmas time in the future, because it was just, it was great. The next one here, which is probably my favorite book of the year, to be honest, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I was actually having a really hard time reading during the first lockdown, because we're in another lockdown in Ontario, in case you didn't know. And I picked up this book, and I had no trouble reading it at all. It sucked me in. I'm pretty sure I read 80 pages in my first sitting reading it. This story was so magical and lovely and wonderful. It pulled me in, it took me away to another world. It was so good, you guys. If you like The Night Circus, I think you would like this. It's not the same story or the same pacing, but it has a similar feel just because I find both of them are I like to describe them as quiet stories, because I don't think they're slow. I mean, maybe other people would find them slow, but to me, they're quiet and always building. And I have discovered one of my favorite kinds of stories. Quiet, magical stories. Like, it's so good. So this book has actually 2 main focuses to the book. So the first one is this guy who comes across a book that has a story about him as a child in it. And he's like, what? This is me. This story is about me. Where did this book come from? Who wrote this? And it's about him trying to get to the bottom of where this story came from, who wrote it, and why he's in it. And it also gives us stories, the other stories that are in this book that his story is in. And as you read the story, and as this character's story unfolds with the people that he meets and the places that he goes, you kind of, like, get to know the other characters in the book, like the storybook that he's read, in real life. Like, all these stories are real, and it's so good and lovely and wonderful, and I wanted to live in this book. I want to live here forever. And this is actually the first time that I really started tabbing. And yeah, I tabbed a lot. It was so good. I feel like this video is just me saying it was so good. Next I have volumes 1 and 2 of Heartstopper, which is just a comic collection of a boy and his crush on another boy, and it's adorable and lovely and wonderful, and just makes me so smiley when reading it, and it makes me so happy. 5 stars, wonderful, faves. Another one here is a graphic novel, Pumpkinheads, by Faith Erin Hicks and Rainbow Rowell. It's lovely and wonderful, and I would like this to be a Netflix movie, pretty please. It's just about 2 high school students who work at a pumpkin patch, and it's the last day of the pumpkin patch being open. It's their last year working at the pumpkin patch, and this guy has a crush on this girl that he's never actually talked to, who also works at the pumpkin patch, and it is about him and his friend going on an adventure, trying to find her and talk to her, and ask her on a date, and they do all of the activities at the pumpkin patch, and it's amazing. Oh my goodness, it's so cozy and adorable and fun and cute, and I loved it so very much. And the last one here, I just have an arc of it, but that's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This book was so deeply sad. It took me like a month to read this book because, well, first of all, it's honker. And also because it is so sad. And it made me feel so sad and blech when I was reading it. But also it was really good. And I loved the characters. And it sucked me in, even though it kind of made me feel blah, but not really in a bad way, just a way that I wasn't expecting. And the only reason I wasn't really expecting it was because I didn't even know what this was about going into it. It was by V.E. Schwab and I wanted it. But it is about a woman who is from like the 1700s or the 1600s or something. Early 1700s, who accidentally makes a deal with like a dark god of some kind, like a devil, a demon, there you go, saying that she doesn't like her life and she feels like she has no freedom, and so he gives her her freedom by letting her live forever, but at a price, which is that she will forever be forgotten. So anyone who knew her before doesn't remember her. Anyone she meets afterwards will forget her as soon as they leave her sight, or she leaves their sight. And it goes back and forth between her time in the 1700s, like at the very beginning of this curse being put on her, and in 2014, when she meets someone who remembers her. And it's, I'm going to say it again. It's so good. It was so good. I loved the characters. I loved the backstory. I loved the guy. It was so lovely, but it was so sad watching her go through nobody remembering her and her just being eternally alone. And I think the fact that I read this during COVID and during like the loneliest year of my life, it amplified that. And I think if I read this at another time, it wouldn't have affected me so deeply or made me so sad. I think a part of why I thought it was so deeply sad was because of the time that I read it. But it was lovely and wonderful and beautiful. And I did some tabbing on this one too. I would love a finished copy of this. I'm going to get my hands on one day. Hey, editing Nat here. I left out a book because I didn't have it on my shelf. I listened to it on audio, and I was picking out my books by looking at them on the shelf because I'm silly. I should have looked on Goodreads instead, but I forgot to mention Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. I listened to the audiobook, which I highly recommend. Also, it's only about 2 hours. It is about a black teenage boy whose brother gets murdered, and the whole story is him going down an elevator on his way to kill the guy who killed his brother. And the whole story is his ride down the elevator, and it's written in verse, and it is incredibly powerful. It's really well written. It was absolutely beautiful. It made me really emotional, and I think it's a really important story, and it was really well done. That is all. Let me know in the comments what your favorite books were of 2020. We can have a chat, and I guess that's all. Have a good day, guys. Bye.